And that is us live. Good evening, everyone. I hope you're really, really well on this Wednesday evening. For some reason, I thought it was Thursday today, but we don't do lives on a Thursday night. So it's good to have you all here. And again, I'm trialing running this on LinkedIn as well. So if you're watching us on LinkedIn, hello. And we're also live on YouTube. I've synced us up to the Purpose Over Profit YouTube channel, which is obviously the podcast, which is affiliated to the Facebook group. So tonight I've got the pleasure of having Neil Stewart with us, who's a property mentor, has been for a number of years. We're going to be talking about all things social housing, which is a strategy he has deployed over his years in property. I maybe be making him feel a little bit old here, but he bought his first buy-to-let back in 2004. Those heady days of growth. So he's a guy with bags of experience, really nice guy. He runs ICANN training and coaching company at the moment. And yeah, looking forward to this. I've had so many questions. We're going to do a Q&A at the end. So Neil's going to do a bit of I've classed it as a masterclass, Neil. We've got half an hour, so like we're setting the expectations high to see how much value we can get. And then we're going to do a bit of a Q&A because I had a few questions come in over the last week as well. I think there's loads of people that are really interested about social housing strategy in general, and probably a few people that are a bit confused as to what is it? What do we mean when we talk about social housing? So yeah, it's fantastic to welcome you into the group. How are you?
Thank you, Darren. I'm fabulous. Thank you very much for inviting me along this evening. Hopefully your group and your Facebook group are going to benefit from what I've got to say tonight. I mean, like you say, you've classed it as a masterclass. We've got about 30 minutes, I think, or 40 minutes. So, it's going to be a very quick masterclass, but I'll do my best to kind of allay some of the myths and give you some ideas about social housing. You mentioned that social housing, it is one of the strategies I do. It's not the only strategy I do. I have been investing, as you said, since 2014, 17, 18 years now, 2004, sorry. And there's been a lot of different strategies I've used, but social housing was one of the first ones I ended up by kind of accident getting involved in. It wasn't something I went out. A lot of people say, what strategy are you going to do? There's a lot of training companies out there, and the first thing they say, what strategy are you going to do? And there are so many different strategies that actually it wasn't a strategy I set out to do. It's just something that happened. When you start looking in some of the cheaper areas of the world or the country, you do come across this kind of scenario. So social housing was one of those things that happened for me. So social housing, what is it? So let's see if we can kind of allay some of the questions or some of the myths about social housing and some of the terms that are out there. But first of all, before I go into that, if you go on to, there are various government websites which will give you statistics. If you're into statistics, there is one I was looking at earlier this week, which I can post somewhere on the group if you want, if somebody's interested in going there. And it's telling you about what's actually happening in the country. This particular one was only for England, but it's a general one, but we can sort of take it for England, Scotland, Wales in general. And it's saying that the number of new houses that are required, or new homes that are required every year, is somewhere in the region of 345,000 properties. So 340,000, that's just in England. So if we add in England, Scotland and Wales and Northern Ireland, that's probably double that. So that's what's required. And in England alone, now England has been doing really well at increasing the number of homes that are being built and provided. But even so, even at doing the best they possibly can, they produced 244 last year. So we've got 100,000 properties deficit. So 100,000 families that need a home. So who's going to provide those? Who's going to provide those 100,000 homes? Well, you might suggest that it might be you, or if that's something that you want to do, something you get involved with, maybe after I've told you a little bit about this evening, that it might be something that you want to do. It might not be for you. To be brutally honest, depending on how you do it, social housing needs a certain type of attitude, let's say. If you are going to work with pure benefit type tenants, people that have never worked in their life, and there are generations of families who have been 3 or 4 generations who've never had a job. they've only been on housing benefits. But there are also people on housing benefit who are just everyday normal people that just don't have enough money coming in to cover the cost of their living or their housing benefit or their homes. So if you're renting a property in some of the more expensive areas of the world, in UK, then you may not be able to pay for the full rent. So housing benefit has come in to help that. So it's not just benefit tenants, only benefit tenants, people who've never worked all their life. People like doctors, nurses, nurses, firemen, those kind of labor intensive jobs, people that are doing the deliveries, the amount of delivery drivers out there at the moment on very low wages. Some of these people just cannot afford a regular payment for a rent. So they come into that category of social housing, and even more so with what's been going on with furlough. Some of the biggest growth market at the moment, there are all of a sudden lots and lots of brokers and sources popping up talking about social housing because of the demand. There are people getting involved, and brokers are the middlemen, effectively, who will find you a contract with a council or an organisation, and then get you to provide the property, and they'll make some money in between. So we'll talk about that a little bit more. But what you want to be is the person that's providing the property indirectly. So some of the terms that are normally used for social housing, you may have come across them, are universal credit, housing benefit I touched on, DSS is a word, and sometimes you might hear leases or FRI leases, fully repaired and insured leases. These are the common things that you hear in social housing, the social housing arena. Now, universal credit and housing benefit are essentially very similar beasts, but about 5 years ago, the government decided they were going to get rid of housing benefit and they were going to replace it with something called universal credit. And the main difference is with housing benefit, it's money that comes on a weekly basis. So every 4 weeks, if you're entitled to a benefit of some sort, housing benefit, you will get 4 weeks housing benefit in arrears. So let's say on the 1st of January, you want some housing benefit, you will get it 4 weeks later, and then every 4 weeks after that. Well, that didn't really work. Doesn't work so great for a lot of landlords or private landlords, because they're saying, well, I'm giving you the house for 4 weeks, and then I'm not getting any rent until the end of that. There are pluses and minuses for housing benefit in that way, because that's also that scenario. You could get paid directly to you. So your tenant doesn't get the housing benefit. It comes straight into your bank account or straight to your letting agent's bank account, however it works. With universal credit, they wanted to replace it. Universal credit, they decided, was going to replace, I think it's 6 or 7 different benefits. So housing benefit was one of them. Job seekers allowance might have been one of them. Disability allowances. There was 6 different allowances. And if you see these programs years ago where they would say, look at these people on benefits, they're earning £40,000 a year. This is what they were trying to avoid, because people could claim for all 6 different benefits and get 6 lots of benefits and really get quite a substantial amount of money coming into their household. So universal credit was designed to replace that, and to replace that in a way so that it was also capped. So you could only get, let's say, for example, a maximum of £21,000 a year for all of the benefits you're entitled to. That came in, and it was also designed to be paid monthly. And as far as housing part of it was concerned, it was going to be paid in advance. So that was great. And that was supposed to be rolled in over the last 5 years. It was supposed to be coming in and replacing housing benefit. It's been a nightmare. It's been a real horrible scenario. Typical government, let's do this, but not actually put it properly in place. There's all sorts of messes. You don't always get it directly to you for universal credit. There's no real people on the end of the phone you can talk to. So it's a bit of a mix. So at the moment, we've got 2 systems. We've got housing benefit and universal credit all going on at the same time. And these are the kind of types of things you might come across. When we're talking about social housing, there are 2 elements to social housing. There's either you renting a property to somebody who's on a benefit, universal credit or housing benefit, or you renting your property to an organization like a council or a charity, or a homeless charity kind of scenario. And those are 2 different types of social housing, so to speak. The first one is really just the same as a private rental sector. You rent a property to somebody through an agent, and the agent then gets the money in, whether they're on housing benefit or not. There are different things. If you get a good agent, can arrange for the housing benefit to be paid directly to the agent, and that way the actual benefit tenant doesn't ever see the money. In some scenarios,
directly to the landlord as well. We've
had
that as well. Yeah.
Absolutely.
But it's like just picking up on one of those things that you said, like that. There's pros and cons to that, but we certainly found over COVID that I think we had about 40% of the portfolio on housing. It was universal credit. I think there was housing benefit of some kind, and there was actually some great service people. I think Susan Aptamil, who might be on the group, but her team helped us move a couple of private tenants onto universal credit who lost their job over that time. It just went, don't know what I'm doing with universal credit. It's all too complicated. But actually, it is recession proof. That money was coming in every single month, and unfortunately, there was some private tenants over the last year that didn't have that money coming in and couldn't pay their rent and got into arrears really, really quickly.
Yeah, I just wanted to. No, that's brilliant. That's a great point. One of the best things about what's been happening is that money's been guaranteed. I have quite a high percentage of a portfolio in South Wales that is on housing benefits or on universal credit. All of those money kept coming in through the whole of COVID, the whole of lockdowns, all of this last year. And in actual fact, the government actually gave it an increase. They increased it by 20% because they thought there was a hardship allowance. And that money was 20% more coming to us. Because they wanted to encourage the landlords not to do anything silly, not to cause any more problems with the tenants. And for that whole period, we've had money coming in all the time. We've had private tenants that have maybe had a struggle, and that's just about conversation, really. But realistically, if you've got universal credit or housing benefit money coming to you direct, most of us have had no challenges with this kind of thing. It's been brilliant. It's been a great scenario. There's also an element, so that's what I'm just touching on, the private rental sector type scenario. There's also an element of you helping out other people. So when I teach the social housing course, there's different types of people that come to it. One type of people is people that want to get passive income, which I'll talk about that part of it in a moment. But there's also a lot of people that want to give back. Maybe they've fallen on hard times. And like you said, they've come across somebody who's helped them out, an agent that's helped them switch to universal credit and apply for universal credit. And they've got into a better situation as a result of it. And they want to help other people less fortunate themselves. And that's something you can do as an investor when you get to that level. You've got some money coming in, you can do those kind of things, which is absolutely fabulous and is a nice way. It doesn't mean you have to do that, but there are people that come to training on social housing for that purpose. They want to give back. What I always say to people is get yourself right first, and then give back. Because once you're in a position that you've got enough passive income coming in and you've got money coming into your bank account, then you can start thinking about helping other people in a better way. Social housing, I call it the super strategy, because social housing you can apply to lots of other strategies. So you talk about buy to let, so your standard rental properties, you can either put in a private tenant or you can put a social housing tenant. You talk about a HMO scenario, you can either put in private tenants or you can put in social housing contracts, and commercial properties as well. You can do lots of different things, and social housing can be a second strategy or a backup plan if the first one doesn't work so well. So that's kind of like your private tenant type scenario on DSS, housing benefit, and universal credit. There is the other. I've seen some questions coming. Do you want me to answer them first, or should I go on to the next bit? We're okay, we?
Yeah, I think we're okay. I haven't got any questions come in. Susan just mentioned there, she's just saying she's got a specialist team within Homes for Good. So I guess anyone that's watching this, particularly, that's who I was referring to. I didn't realise Susan was on actually, but there you go. I'm glad I mentioned her.
Yeah, you'd have been in trouble.
So last year we had some tenants who got into some difficulty. Susan's got a team, Homes for Good, who are across. Susan will correct us in the chat box if I'm wrong, but across Scotland basically, but mainly Glasgow, South, and in Ayrshire. I think you've got an office that you've set up in the last year again, and yeah, helped us with at least one of our tenants who was just struggling with the process, weren't getting the right top up on universal credit, and for both a landlord and a tenant, it can be really frustrating. And through no fault of anyone's really, well, you could say maybe partly the system, but yeah, so anyone having difficulty with that, I guess, yeah, Susan was fantastic there. So shout out to Susan.
Awesome. So interestingly enough, Scotland, when you look at the percentage of population to Scotland and to England, the percentage of social housing in Scotland is double that there is in England. So actually, if you're going into social housing, Scotland's a great place to be doing it because there's a much, much higher demand than there is in England or Wales. So you've actually got a much higher level of requirement and needs, and there's a lot more people out there, availability. There's lots of other things that you can tap into. So being where you guys are, I'm not sure if everyone on your link is in Scotland, on your group is Scotland, but there's obviously quite a good substantial of them. So that's a good opportunity. So the other part of social housing that I wanted to sort of touch on and tell you a little bit about is the leases, or the FRI, the fully repaired and insured leases. So this is really an opportunity to really make passive income. With any strategy or anything you do, there's always a setup. There's always, people talk about passive income. There's always a setup to that, getting it right. There's no such thing as 100% passive income. It's kind of, no matter what you do, whether you're buying a ready-made business or you're doing something, you're always going to have some kind of setup. So same with social housing. You've got to go out and find the properties, or you've got to go out and find the demand for what you need. I had one lady who was on Homes Under the Hammer. I was coaching her. She bought a property. She was doing it up as a HMO. The council approached her and said, we'd like to take that off you for 5 years on a lease, and we'd like to take it off you. We will pay all the bills, all the maintenance, anything that's going on. We will cover all the costs. We'll put in tenants, take tenants out. You'll have no need for a letting agent or anybody to get involved. And we will give you the house back in as good a condition or better in 5 years' time. So all that's going to happen is every month you're going to get money drop into your bank account, and you have nothing to do with that property for 5 years. So she was really excited about that strategy, and that's the lease side of things. And at the end of that property, I helped her do it. She got it over. She said to me, what should I do next? I said, well, let's do some more. So she went back to the council and said, I want to do some more. Do you want any more? Where do you want them? And they said, well, we want them in these areas. So she went to the auctions, and they were filming Homes Under the Hammer, and her property got picked up, and she talked about this strategy. So she actually bought to demand, which is the way you should be doing this. She knew she had a client or a organization that wanted the properties, wanted this particular type of property, knew what they were going to pay her, knew they were going to take it off her for 5 years, and all she had to do is go and find them. It was that straightforward. And that's what she built her portfolio on doing. She bought about 3 or 4 HMOs, and she was financially free pretty much straight away, and started working with the council, and they started to use it. So the leases, the fully repaired insurance, it's not always, you can't always get them. You have to negotiate with the councils. And a lot of people think you can't negotiate with councils. Well, that's not true. The lease itself is a contract. It's a commercial contract. And you can always talk to the council about what you need. Council will try and give you a contract, try and give you something that they want you to accept and take. Now, that may not be enough money for you. It may not be enough for you to cash flow on the property. That doesn't mean you can just walk away. What you could do is go back and tell them, look, that's not right. I can't do it for that amount. I need this amount. Can you do it? And again, I've had people that we've been coaching that have done that, and they've come to me and said, oh, the council aren't giving me enough. What should I do? So we've gone back to them. We've explained to them what we need. We're not being greedy in this. We're just saying, look, if we put it on the private rental market, we'll get this for it. We put it for you. We're happy to take a little bit less because we're not going to have any agency fees or anything like that. But we do need this amount. The council have said, no, we're not doing it. So we've walked away. And the phones rang the next day, and the council said, actually, I think we can do it. So it depends on how much they really need the properties. If they really need the properties, they do have the budget to do it. And they do have opportunities to take it off you. And then you can start negotiating, how much are you going to pay us? What's the terms? Some organizations want the properties fully furnished, and they might give you a list of the furnishings they want you to put in there. There's companies like, I think you mentioned when we were talking before, Mears, and some of these companies, they have a particular list of furnishings they want. We're doing a property up in Glasgow at the moment that's going to go for 3 years to one of these charities. It's going to go to them as soon as we're completing the purchase in the next week or so. And that's going to go straight over on a 3-year deal. We don't even have to do anything with it. It's already got furniture in it. We're buying it with furniture in it. So it's one of those almost passive incomes. And there are all sorts of mannerisms of these type of contracts. So they're very, very flexible, very, very workable. And you can, if you do it right, you can sometimes make more money than the private sector, because you don't have those fees, you don't have those agency fees, you don't have the maintenance. There are even scenarios in different parts of UK where the council will even help you with your refurbs. So you've got, I've got one in Wales, for example, and I think you can still do it in Scotland as well, where the council in this particular town offered a 25,000 interest-free loan for 3 years against the property that I was buying, I was doing up. So they've given me £25,000 to pay for my refurb, interest-free for 3 years. I don't even have to do any payments for that for 3 years. In 3 years' time, if I want to, I refinance and I pay them back the £25,000. Or I could just refinance and do another one. And a year later, refinance and do another one. I could do 3 with that £25,000 that's been given to me free money. There's also scenarios with things like boilers and heating systems. I've got another property where I've just put a tenant in. She's on one of the benefits that qualify for a boiler. She's getting this particular house has never had gas supplied to it. She's getting a gas supply fitted for free. She's getting a whole 3-bedroom house, boiler and radiators and water heating system for free. So that would have cost me maybe £3,000-4,000 to do that with the gas connection. The government are going to pay for that, and there are grants and all sorts out there. So if you haven't considered
where does that come from, Neil? Sorry, so I guess a couple of things spring to mind. I know we've got some questions there. We will be doing a Q&A at the back of this, guys, so bear with us. But I guess how does the conversation start? So I think Colette's picked up on that one. Who do you speak to in the council? You mentioned there was a client there of yours that, was creating a HMO, and the council had came across. It sounds like the council had approached, but how does that happen? You mentioned also there was potentially some brokers involved just now, touting this as a to broker these relationships. It's something which I've heard a lot of people struggle to speak to the right people in order to help with that strategy. People who are actually coming from a really good place on it, not to take advantage or exploit, but actually would rather take in less rent, but be able to service people who they would see as being in greater need for good quality, safe, clean, affordable housing.
Yeah. So the first point there about where do we find these kind of things? It's something we do an awful lot of work with our clients, is that actually getting to talk to the right person in the council can be a challenge, and it can be different councils, different organisations give the person that's responsible different names. So some of them would call a department, might call them private rental sector. Some might call it the empty homes officer might be involved in it. Some might call it the people that are responsible for health and safety. There are lots of different titles. So there's no one title I could say to you, do this, but I try all 3 of those for starters. And you have to make these phone calls to the council, and you get someone on the end of the phone who has no idea what you're talking about to start with. So you pick up the phone and you say, can I speak to somebody in your department who deals with social housing tenants? Oh, we don't do that here. You say, okay, well, where do you do it? And there's a lot of scripts around this. We talk an awful lot. We do, like I said, we've got 10 minutes left or whatever tonight, but we do an awful lot on the scripting, on what to say, what questions to ask. We do a kind of a live session with people and make them phone the councils up and get them to ask questions. We did this exercise last year, and we had one lady phone the Newcastle Council, and the Newcastle Council were offering £10,000 grant, free money, and a £25,000 loan. And that was by phoning and asking the right questions of the right people. She was coming from the right place. She had previously had to live in social housing accommodation, and she wanted to help others. So what I said was, well, you can help others, but there is things available for you to help you as well. So we worked through that. Getting to the right people is a challenge. It is. But when you get to the right people, you find they are really lovely people. They're really lovely to work with. With lots of all of the students I've ever worked with have got to the right person. Once you get to that right person, they're lovely. They're nice people. They're nothing to be frightened of. They're there for the same reason. They're there to help people. And you're coming from the same place as them. So actually you get on really well with them. There was another part you asked me about. The brokers. Not the brokers, the brokers. So at the moment, there's lots and lots of people approaching people with houses. I've had, because I don't know if I mentioned, I've got a letting agency down in Wales as well. We've had phone calls from people saying, have you got any houses? We want some houses. We've got a contract with the council that want to take your houses on board. And these guys are brokers, and they've heard of councils that are looking for this kind of thing, and they're coming to us to provide houses to them, so they make the money in the middle. Well, we wouldn't do that kind of thing. We won't get involved with them because they're middlemen, and realistically, we want to work directly with the council because we want to know where we are with the contract and how it's going to work. If it's beneficial for both of us, we're happy to pay them a little bit of a fee, but we do need to talk directly to the people that you're working with. So everybody who's out there, if you do get approached with anybody that's saying we're looking for this, this, and this, research them. You can go on Companies House and you can research that company, and you'll find if they've only been set up in the last 6 months of the year, they're probably a broker that are tapping into this kind of scenario. And you can look into what information they've got, and then you can question them a little bit deeper and find out what's going on. But they're out there and they are doing it. The bad ones are trying to get the property from you on a normal everyday rent, so a family let, and then rent it to the council on a HMO let. So they're making money in the middle. And there are a few of them out there doing that. Now, that might sound bad, but there are scenarios where I've got a client, again, a foreign client, who bought some property through a sourcing agent in Manchester, lives abroad in China, never been over to Manchester, took the word of the agent. She put together a family pot of money, about £1 million or something, and just bought loads of properties through this sourcing agent. Then when she came to me with the trouble, she was having problems with these properties. We found out we couldn't rent these rooms. She had something like 20 rooms and they just weren't renting. Now, she had a beautiful, immaculate refurb done on these properties. They looked amazing, but she hadn't done any research. And there was something like 200 rooms available in that one town that she had. And hers were another 10. There's so much competition, it wasn't renting out. Now, for her, she was panicking. She'd spent all this money on properties, done them all up, they weren't renting. For her, this scenario worked well. We managed to get a better rent from the broker for her, not a HMO rent, but a better than a family rent. And then he took it on a 5-year deal, so she's got some money coming in. But so sometimes it works. I'm not saying they're all bad, but if your circumstances are in a certain way, it'll work well for you. And
the more people involved with anything, the more money that's coming off the table, basically, or you're leaving on the table, I guess, from an investment side. And it is like what I'm hearing. It's not probably there's any silver bullet to it. It's picking up the phone and phoning if you're in the wrong area, which you often do when you speak to the council. Go and see if you can phone someone, see if they can give you a name for someone else. And when you end up speaking to the right person, I guess it's asking the right questions. So asking about grants, loans, for specific types of property, or and if there's social housing contracts that are available, I guess, yeah.
They don't always advertise it, and a lot of them on your first phone call, they're not going to be that open. I know we're in lockdown and trying to talk to somebody face to face at the moment is a challenge, but once we're coming out of lockdown and once we can start meeting people again properly, I would say do that. Again, I had somebody in Liverpool. We were doing the same thing. We were doing a coaching, mentoring session in Liverpool, and we were trying to get to the council, constantly phoning the council, and we were getting gatekeepers, people just saying no. So I said, right, stuff it. Let's go down to council. I went down to the council. Now, if you walk into a council office building and the receptionist there and you ask the question, they can't ignore you. They can't try and fob you off on the phone, can they? Oh, we don't do that. We don't do that. You can say, well, do you have anybody that might know any better than that? And they'll be frantically looking through their directory in front of them on the screen to find somebody that says something to do with housing. And then they'll phone that person, and that person will then come down. That person then came down and spent 15, 20 minutes with us. And we started to build that relationship up and what they needed. And it started with that. So it's a little bit about being tenacious, a bit thick-skinned, about not giving up and not taking the first knock back as it's not going to happen. The amount of times I hear people say, oh, they don't do it around here. So, well, how do you know that? Well, I made a phone call and they said no. So you made one phone call. Yeah, and that's it. So you've decided it's over. So that kind of thing doesn't, you've got to be able to say, I've got to keep going. If this is really where I want to be, it's something that you're passionate about, then you've got to keep making those phone calls and going and knocking on the door. I think my good friend Heather, she calls it trapping on the door. You call it trapping up there?
I think it's the first time I've heard that, but there you go. I don't know. There's a few people that have worked with Heather before, so I don't know. Is that a phrase you've heard her use?
She used it once when we were teaching someone. I goes, "What are you trapping on the door? What do you mean?" And she's like, I thought it was something you did in Glasgow, but obviously not.
Well, I don't know. I'm not native Glasgow, so I've only been adopted over here. So there you go. Might be a West Coast thing, Neil. But fantastic. I'm conscious of time. We're going to get a few questions, so Chapping on
Yeah.
on the door, not there we go. It's maybe Colette says maybe it's chapping on the door. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that must be a Scottish thing then. I used to play chapdoor run a lot in my spent youth. Martin's just mentioned there, I don't know if it's a question or a statement, but Energy Savings Trust still offering funding for heating, etc. I don't know whether he's asking you or
There are so the people we've got I'm trying to think of their names now. I wrote it down here somewhere because they've made a phone call to me today. They are A&D Carbon Solutions was a company. They're based in Wales. They phoned me today for the lady I'm talking about that's getting the full heating system and the gas supply. They're based in Wales, but it doesn't matter. Basically, they're sending someone out to do a survey to Friday because the property's never had any gas to it, and the surveyor's going to come around and see there's no gas ever supplied. Then they can then apply for the funding to. It comes from the big energy companies, so people like E.ON, like SSE, they have to put some money every year into a pot towards energy performance improvements. So things like she also had loft installation for free, cavity walls installation for free. All these things are simple things you get. The actual boiler replacements you have to meet certain criteria, but it's there and it's available and they're out there. I think you could just do a search on Google for a free boiler or Energy Trust or something like that. On the Energy Savings Trust website, you can do a search for your local providers and who are doing it. They will do all the hard work. All you have to do is prove that you're on benefits or your tenant's on benefit, if it's a tenant's benefit, or some of the benefits that qualify. There's a lot of benefits that qualify for it. One of them is even if you're ex-military and you're on a military pension sort of scheme, that even that kind of thing qualifies for it. So there's a huge range there, and there's a massive pot of money that they have to spend. They have to use it, so you may as well get it.
Yeah, and so that's something that can work whether it's either side of the coin of what you would class as social housing, so your kind of universal credit private tenancy agreement, or whether it's more in this commercial sort of lease, I guess, FRI lease. Fantastic. So something just before we get into the Q&A, I suppose I'll kick it off, will I? Since I can. In terms of the difference, so what sort of typical rental difference would you expect between the private rented amount where you're going to take in the risk of you're going to maybe get a slightly higher rate, but you're going to take potentially voids, might be more difficult to fill, as opposed to that kind of more guaranteed monthly lease that's going to come in? What's the typical sort of difference between the two?
There used to be something called a third percentile, so it was like 30% cheaper. But that's not the case because it's gone up all the time. There is a website called lhadirect.gov where you can go onto that website and you can pop in the postcode of a property that you're thinking of. Perhaps if you've got one of your own, you can put your own house in, and it will come up when you put the postcode in, and it will give you the room rent they'll pay. It will give you the 1-bedroom rate, 2-bedroom, 3-bedroom, 4-bedroom. They don't pay any more for any more than 4 bedrooms. So if you've got a 5-bedroom house, you don't get any more. And it gives you the weekly amount that they'll pay. So to find out what that is, a monthly, you multiply it by 52 for 52 weeks in the year, and then divide it by 12, and that gives you an idea of what the rent will be. And it is less. It is normally, there's probably one area in the whole of UK where actually it's slightly more. But normally it's a little bit less. Not always. Sometimes it's like for like. Sometimes it isn't. But the best part of this is if you're going for a lease, you're not going to be paying agents' fees. So your agent's fees can be anything from 10% to 15%. If you're paying £500 a month on rent and you're paying 10% agent fees, that's £50 gone straight away. Well, you're not going to pay that with the council. So if the council are paying you £460 a month, you're actually £10 a month better off. So, and then of course you've got the challenge with having a maintenance fund. So we always encourage people to put 10% of their rent into a pot for maintenance. Well, you're not going to have any maintenance either. So effectively, if you've got a lease that's fully repaired and insured, that 10% that you put a pot you don't need that either. So suddenly you're actually making, in some cases, more than you would in a private rental sector. And you don't have the voids. You don't have to pay an agent every time you get a new tenant. You don't have to pay a finder's fee and a setup fee that your letting agent would charge you. So if your tenant moves after 6 months, you suddenly got a new tenant coming in. That's another chunk of money you've got to take out the rent for that. So it can very quickly get to a better scenario. So just looking at that headline rate isn't always the best way to do it.
Yeah, so even if, I mean, I'm thinking about for our own portfolio, I mean, we've got about, as I said, about 40% that we would have, I suppose, on tenancies that will be universal credit tenants, I guess, or they'll have some sort of housing benefit. But we would sometimes be looking at buy-to-lets and be looking at the rent, running our numbers based on LHA rates anyway. So I guess even if that's your kind of target market for the area that you've bought, you're talking about you're not going to be paying your letting fee, which could be 10 to 15%, and then you're not going to have your other expenses if it's on the right type of contract either. In terms of FRI lease. So okay, so yeah, I hope that makes sense to everyone. But that, I mean, that in real terms could be 20%, 25% in terms of what you would be currently putting out as costs just now would be added to your bottom line.
Yeah, and look at that. If you've got a whole year and you don't have to re-rent the property for a whole year, no voids.
100%. Yeah.
There was a question came in about lending. I saw.
Yes. Yeah.
Lending impact lending on social housing. There are some real good products out there now. Yes, you do have to consider what you're doing with the properties. If you are going to go on a lease and you are going to lend it to, and you are going to lease it out to a council or an organisation or a charity, there are lenders out there that will provide mortgages for that. You've got to make sure you've got to get the right mortgage for that property. And there are some caveats where they might say that some lenders might say they don't want ex-drug users, or they don't want rehabilitation, or they don't want certain types of community in there. So you just got to make sure you don't have that product. But there are the broker we've got on our team here. He's got at least 10 or 15 lenders that are all in the social housing market, which is brilliant, because 5-10 years ago it was a lot less. There was probably 3 or 4, maybe 5, but they're all coming into the market. There's lots more there. Some pop in, some pop out. So the main consideration is just to make sure you check with your lender, are we okay to have this to this charity that's going to be putting in homeless, for example? And they say, yeah, that's not a problem, homeless people. But you then have to communicate that, and that has to be written in your contract with the council in the lease to say you cannot put in this type of tenant. Say, for example, someone has been convicted of arson. They may not like that because they're going to set fire to the houses and they're going to burn them down. So they might say, okay, they may be rehabilitated, but we're not having them in our houses. So if you put someone in there, your mortgage is void. The biggest thing on top of that is to make sure your insurance is proper. You've got to get the correct insurance, because even if that house burns down and you haven't told your insurance company that you've got social housing tenants in there, whether they're just housing benefit tenants, whether they're on rehabilitation or something like that, you've got to tell your insurance company about that, because if something does go wrong, all insurance companies are always looking for reasons not to pay out, aren't they? And suddenly they say, well, you didn't tell us you were putting in housing benefit tenants in there. Sorry, we're not paying out. So
maybe just a watch out for anyone that's got, even if on the private tenant side, if you've got a tenant that's potentially on benefits or universal credit, check your insurance is comfortable with that tenant 100%. In there. There's no clause that potentially might come back and bite you. Okay.
There is, I mean, and most insurances and companies are fine with it. I have an insurance policy which is a block policy, and as I get a new property, I just add it to it. And every year you ask me the same questions: what type of tenants have you got in each property? And the spreadsheet comes and it says LHA or housing benefit, stroke private tenants or whatever, and that's fine, and they'll cover that. But if you don't disclose it, and something goes wrong, and the insurance company sends out a loss adjuster, I've had I can tell you lots of fun stories which put people off going for social housing. I had a situation where I gave a property to a local charity that were putting people in that had come out of drug rehabilitation. So I had a 2-bedroom house on the market. The charity approached me, said, look, I've got this couple. It's a young boy and a young girl. They're not together, but they're just good for each other. They come out, they've had 6 months rehabilitation with us. We want to put them into a property. We will come and visit them every week, make sure everything's okay. Are you comfortable? Because nobody else wants to give them a chance. We said, yeah, fine, put them in there. And very quickly, the council workers got moved to a different job. So they stopped going to visit them. And very quickly, things went a bit wrong. And what happened, unfortunately, was the young lad overdosed and died in the property. The young girl freaked out because she was still on drugs, and she stole all the pipes, all the copper, but didn't turn the water off. So the water was coming through, completely wrecked the whole property. Now, if I hadn't disclosed that they were benefit tenants or they were of that scenario, that was one of the first questions a loss adjuster said to me. Who were the tenants in here? What, were they on benefits? If I hadn't disclosed that in the first place, I would have been in big trouble. But the insurance company paid it all out. They sent a loss adjuster. They even sent in people to put it all right for me, and it was all back on the market within a couple of months, ready to go. And I even got loss of rent for the period that it was damaged.
So insurance, if you're not 100% sure, I think if you're taking anything from this, go and check your insurance more than anything. So see, in terms of the mortgage product, because it's something else that came in another group today. Is that something that's you mentioned that you've got someone in your team? Is it a specialist broker that people need to go to, or will kind of mainstream all market lenders be able to get access to those products?
Any good broker with all market lending should find those kind of products. If you're struggling, by all means ask me. You're happy to use the guy I use, it's not a problem. I'll pass on his details, no problem at all. He's fabulous. He'll talk to you about what your strategies are and everything else. He's been involved in my power team for the last 8-9 years. He's awesome. I've had some challenging people, not challenging people, but challenging situations like bad credit files, whatever. I've thrown them all at him, and he's always found them some lending. Every single time he's found a way. It may not be the cheapest lending, but to get them started, he's got them something. So that's me just bigging him up. His name's Wayne, but you're bound to have people in your place where the good brokers can get you this kind of stuff. But I always, and Wayne knows this, I have 2 brokers. Whenever I get a product come up, I go to Wayne, I say, I need this. And I go to the other one as well. And I'll say, throw me a product. This is a business. Now, Wayne and I are really good friends, but he knows I'm in business. And he says, okay, I'll find out the products for you, bang, 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 and we'll look at the 2 products. And if one product's better than the other, I'll go with the best product. There's no problem with that between him and me. We're both in business. But and that's how you guys and everybody doing this should do that, whether it's no matter what you do, it's your business. I know we feel loyalty to certain people and we feel, we should do that. But if they're good people and they're good business people, they'll know that they've got to provide the best service. Otherwise, you will go somewhere else.
Yeah. But there's also a cost of paying for that, like you said as well. I've seen people that will be like, well, if I go to a broker as long as they're free, but it might not be all market. So they have to get paid somewhere. And so, just be aware of it, I guess. Ultimately, I've always said it, that getting lending is probably the most important thing, because if your back end isn't sorted, then you ain't pulling any money back out.
No.
You're kind of stuck. So fantastic. And lastly, I guess, there's a question, actually, no, there's a second last question. Yoko's asked, how can she get in touch with you? Yoko, I can pass that on, so no worries about that. Yoko actually runs a group in the Northwest of investors as well. So I think, I'll pass the details on. Yoko, Quana, generally, are mortgage rates higher or insurance premium higher as a result? I'd imagine.
No, the mortgage rates. No, it's not higher percentage. It's not higher on the interest either, on the insurance either. In fact, insurance is more expensive when the property's empty now than more than anything else. So while you're doing a refurb, that's when it costs the most. But I've not had any trouble or any bad rates for having benefit tenants or leases. Not at all.
Just making sure that the insurance covers and there's no
Make
stipulations.
Sure your insurance covers it. Yeah. Make sure you disclose that. That's the biggest thing you've got. If you take nothing away from this evening, make sure you check your insurance policy. And don't think by not telling them you're going to get it cheaper that's a false economy. Tell them. Okay. A good insurance broker will find you insurance with somebody. And the big people, I think RSA is one that I've used over the years. They're a big insurance company, and they don't have a problem with this kind of thing.
Yeah, good stuff. Okay, I think that's all the questions on there. Last question that I wanted for you is just anyone looking to get into social housing, in terms of whether you believe it's a strategy or not, how can they go about it? What's the number one thing that you would say where to start?
The biggest thing for social housing is, as I said, I touched on with one of my students, is that you've got to find where the demand is. Where's the demand? So you've got to make those phone calls. You've got to find the people at the source. So the councils, the organisations, the charities. There are lots of them about. have a talk to them and find out what their demand is. If there's a demand, then go shopping for houses to meet that demand. Don't go out there thinking, this is a nice area. Wouldn't it be nice to provide social housing for people? If there's no demand, social housing people are like families, communities. They like to live in small groups. So everyone will know where you live. There's somewhere people are saying, well, that's a social housing area. That's where people live of that type of person, because they like to be in groups. They like their family. I've got properties where I've given it to one social housing tenant. I get a phone call from her saying, my auntie May's looking for a place. Have you got anything? Yeah, auntie moves in, sister moves in a property across the road. They all want to be near each other. They help each other out. They support each other. They look after each other, which is a lovely way to be. So there isn't any real focus on that until you find the demand. Find the demand. Make sure there's a demand, like everything. When you've got that, yeah, there's definitely something going on here. It's worth investigating further. Then you can start getting involved. Don't just go out there and think you're gonna be able to do it, no problem at all, because it doesn't always work. It'd be weird. There's 2 social housing areas in Swansea that I've got properties. The one in one social housing area, they don't want to live in the other because they say, oh, I don't like the people over there. And in this one, they go, I don't want to live over there because they like people over there. And it's really strange because they've got these 2 communities going on. And it's quite funny. So make sure the demand's there first.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, thanks so much, Neil. I feel like that's been a whistle stop 45 minutes. We've just run over a bit there just now, but I've certainly got tons of value. I hope everyone listening has as well. Before you go, how can people find out about you? What have you got going on at the moment? Where can they find you?
Okay, so the easiest way to find me is go onto our website, which is icantraining.co.uk, which is that's for ICAN training.co.uk. There is a contact excellent there. If you want to have a chat with me, you can click and it actually connects right into my diary. You can book a 30-minute slot with me if you want to have a chat about your strategies, what you want to do. And if there's any benefit of you taking some coaching with me. At the moment, coaching is really what I'm focusing on. I'm coaching people for short-term, long-term, whole year sort of coaching programs, or even just doing little reviews with people's portfolios, see how we can do it better. But there's a free 30-minute session there. If you want to come and talk to me, book it in. You get access to my diary, just book it in and we'll have a good chat for 30 minutes. Even if you just want to check you're doing the right thing, or that is there anything else that you're missing out, just come and get in touch. That's what all you have to do. Click and book it in.
Perfect. I'll say as well, if you come off the call, if you go into the Facebook group, Neil, I'd just drop it in the comments as well. I should have said. And that might be easiest for everyone that's watching it on the rerun as well.
Okay, absolutely.
Good stuff. All right, well, thanks so much, Neil. And next week, I can't remember what we've got next week. That's absolutely terrible, but it'll be something that you'll need to come back and watch for. It'll be absolutely must
It'll
see.
Be good.
But yeah, it's been great. I've taken great amount of notes on that as well, Neil. So thanks so much for coming in.
You're welcome. Thank you for asking me. I really enjoyed it. Thank you very much.
Not at all. All right. Bye, everyone. Have a great night.
Bye-bye.